Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act and hear about the important efforts to end youth homelessness. My name is Mark Greenberg. I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary at the Administration for Children and Families in the Department of Health and Human Services. Today, we're recognizing the only federal anti-homelessness initiatives aimed specifically at young people. The programs that are authorized by the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act and administered by the Family and Youth Services Bureau, FYSB, at the Administration for Children and Families. We're also celebrating the hundreds of community-based programs around the country that have worked hard for these past 40 years to end youth homelessness. Most important, we're celebrating the accomplishments of the young people themselves, and of course, we want to express our tremendous appreciation to Cindy Lauper for the work she has done on these issues and for joining us and speaking with us today. So thank you, Cindy, for being part of this. We've come a long way since 1974 when the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act was signed. Before the act was signed, young people who had run away or had been found on the streets were routinely viewed as delinquents, put in detention centers or jails far too often. Today, the Act enables youth-serving organizations across the country to move young people into stable housing, provide vital services such as family and individual counseling, education support, and career training. In 2013, more than 30,000 young people across the country were served by FYSB-funded emergency shelters that enabled them to have a safe place to stay, help them return to their families or another stable living situation, such as a friend's or a relative's house or a residential program. Another 3,322 young people entered FYSB-funding transitional living programs that year. These young people couldn't return home because of severe family conflict, abuse, abandonment, or a host of other issues. Transitional living programs gave them a place to stay, often their own apartments, helped them continue their education, embark on careers, deal with mental health or substance abuse, trauma, or other issues that hampered social and emotional well-being. The ultimate goal of these programs is to prepare youth to become independent, to support themselves, and in some cases, their own children. Street youth are particularly at risk for sexual exploitation and trafficking. So in 2013, FYSB-funded street outreach programs in more than 100 communities made contact with youth more than 600,000 times, handing out toothbrushes, socks, sandwiches, water, referrals to clinics, cards with the address of a nearby shelter, all with the goal of helping to get young people off the street and out of harm's way. And the national hotline that is funded by FYSB at Chicago's National Runaway Safe Line answered more than 200 calls a day from youth and concerned adults, offering an important lifeline and reunification services. While thousands of people are helped every year by FYSB's programs, there's more to be done. Far too many young people experience homelessness each year. The Department of Housing and Urban Development estimates that on a single night in January of 2013, there were 46,924 unaccompanied children, teens, and young adults experiencing homelessness in the United States. An important step toward ending youth homelessness is getting better data and getting a better understanding about why young people become homeless, what happens to them when they're homeless, and what services they need. So I am pleased to introduce my colleague, Risa Matthew, Director of FYSB's Division of Adolescent Development and Support, to talk about an important new study of street youth conducted in partnership with street outreach program grantees in 11 cities across the country. Risa?
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm very excited to be here to share some of the findings from our street outreach program with you. we conducted the first of a kind study with youth living on the streets in 11 cities, as Mark mentioned. And a lot of our street outreach programs in those 11 cities were able to conduct interviews and focus groups with street youth, totaling 656 youth ages 14 to 21. The executive summary of the study is actually, my understanding, is actually available outside the room, so please feel free to pick one up. We wanted everyone to have some highlights of the study in preparation for the 40th anniversary of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, also in preparation for National Runaway Prevention Month, which is in November. And we anticipate the full report will be out by the end of the year. So why is this study important, you ask yourself? Well, first, the data from this study provide a huge stepping stone in learning more about the service youth and needs of a subset of street homeless youth. Second, the data have broad implications because they confirm some of the findings we've seen in other studies, and we also know that we're hearing some of these information from the field. The study also helps demystify some of the misconceptions that we have of young people who are homeless. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the misconceptions and comparing it to some of our study findings. So misconception number one, young people could go home, find someone to stay with, or go to a shelter. Well, our study found that getting off the street is difficult. Study participants had been homeless on and off for a total of about 2 years. 2 years of wondering where they're going to sleep each night, where their next meal may come from, instead of focusing on school and developing job skills and also experiencing those teenage lessons that they can use to develop socially and emotionally. More than half of these young people reported that they tried to get to a shelter for safe housing, but the beds were not available. And more than 1 in 4 youth said they had no transportation to get to a shelter. Remember, young people aren't just homeless in cities. They're homeless in suburbs and in rural areas where there may be little or no transportation. We know that there are not enough beds. We know that there are not enough beds to house young people that are homeless. So according to a point-in-time count, on a given night in January of 2013, there were a total of 4,117 beds available for young people under the age of 18 who were homeless. This same point-in-time count also showed that nearly 6,200 unaccompanied minors experienced homelessness on a given night in January of 2013. This means that more than 2,000 minors did not have a place to sleep. We do not have enough beds. The second misconception I'd like to address is that young people are on the streets living a life of freedom away from adults. Homelessness is not freedom. Rather, it's hunger and fear and not having a place to sleep. And young people are on the streets are victimized at high rates. In our study, 60% reported they had been raped, beaten up, or robbed. The third misconception I'd like to address is that homeless young people are bad or want to be on their own without adult support. In our study, more than half of homeless youth became homeless for the first time because they were asked to leave home by a parent or caregiver. And nearly a quarter became homeless because they were being physically abused or beaten. Nearly 30% of participants in our study reported being gay, lesbian, or bisexual, and an additional 7% reported being transgender. Though our study did not ask if youth left home because they were rejected after coming out, we think it's telling that LGBT youth were so overrepresented among the group of street youth that we interviewed. And the fourth and final misconception that I'd like to address today is homeless youth don't have aspirations. Well, our study found that in addition to wanting basic things like shelter and transportation, more than half of the young people said they needed services to advance their education. More than 70% said they needed employment services. So when young people, and we know this, when they get these types of supports, they can succeed. Today, we're going to hear from 3 resilient young people in just a few minutes. But at this point in time, I have the privilege of introducing Laura Zeilinger, Executive Director of the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, who's going to talk more about what we need to do to end youth homelessness by 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Risa, for the introduction and for your incredible partnership. I'm honored to be here today. It is vitally important that we keep shining the spotlight on youth homelessness, keeping this issue front and center. Ending youth homelessness is a social justice issue. In each of our cities and towns, as we've heard every night, there are young people who face the unimaginable risk of exploitation, abuse, countless traumas that threaten not only their immediate health and well-being, but that can inflict long-term damage. Everyone, from the federal government to change agents like Cyndi Lauper and the True Colors Fund, to every youth provider in America, every school, we all have the shared responsibility and opportunity to be the caring adult who brings young people back to safety, back to stable housing, helping them establish permanent connections, and improve their outcomes in education, employment, and well-being. Because of the very nature of youth homelessness, what we know about it is limited, and improving the data on youth is vital, which is why the release of this new study from HHS is so important to this effort. It adds to our understanding. We know also that what gets measured gets done, which is why getting to a confident estimate of the size of the population is critical. The federal government, with partners across sectors, is working now to get the quality of data to where it needs to be through focused efforts to improve the annual point-in-time counts for youth. But let me be clear, while better data is critical to solving the problem, there are things that we can do now today to improve the lives and outcomes for youth. To do so, we need to make some changes. We need to be smarter about how we understand and meet the needs of youth. We need to work together to connect youth with the resources and systems they need in a meaningful and in a systematic way. We can take action today to identify and use the touch points that we have to more effectively understand and meet the needs of young people. This report gives us that much more to work with. No single program is the magic pill. No agency can alone end youth homelessness, but many play an important part. When a young person is in crisis, it is not fragmented by government programs. It is whole and it is overwhelming. Yet, when solutions are viewed through the lens of programs, the scope of their interaction is often narrowly defined by whether they're part of a school or law enforcement, juvenile justice, protective services. So often we find ourselves in the situation where, on some level, many are responsible in part, but nobody is responsible for the whole. And without a system in place, it's impossible for people to even understand their role. This has to change, and we are focused on changing it. Programs have to break out of silos and be able to put youth at the center of their work. This is how we solve complex social problems. At the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, we have the necessary and extraordinary mission of coordinating among 19 federal agencies, working with states, communities, the private sector, nonprofit organizations throughout the country on efforts to prevent and end homelessness. In 2010, the Obama administration launched Opening Doors, the first ever federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness. And in Opening Doors, we set 4 bold and measurable goals: to end homelessness among veterans and their families by the end of 2015, to end chronic homelessness in 2016, to end homelessness among families, among youth, and among children in 2020. Since 2010, we have changed the trajectory on homelessness in our country. We have established a trend line toward ending homelessness across each of our goals. We know now that homelessness is not an intractable problem. It is a problem we can solve, a problem we are solving. In fact, since 2010, we've reduced homelessness among veterans by 1/3. nationwide. We've made significant progress ending veteran homelessness because we knew from years of study and research what interventions work, and with bipartisan support from Congress, we asked for and received the resources to meet those needs. With veteran homelessness as a proof point, we are making the case for our youth as well. We have a federal framework to end youth homelessness where we set a path to progress by improving data and building systems. This progress was not made by government alone, but in partnership with stakeholders across the country. We are stronger and more effective when we work together toward the shared vision that every young person deserves a safe and stable place to call home, which is why I am so honored to introduce the next speaker. She is someone I truly admire. Her passion and dedication to who she calls her kids is an inspiration and a force that is moving our work with greater urgency and focus. To many, she is a Grammy, Emmy, and Tony Award-winning artist. And to thousands of young people, and to people who are part of this effort, she is an unwavering advocate for equality. In 2008, she founded the True Colors Fund, which works to end gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered youth homelessness. Just a few weeks ago, I heard her speak about choosing a path for the True Colors Fund, where she described the choices for the direction of the organization to raise awareness of the issues and share best practices, or to roll up her sleeves and do the hard work of ending youth homelessness. She and her amazing team chose the latter. One thing I appreciate about Cindy is her emphasis on the importance of learning from young people about what matters and how to make a difference. I'm grateful that we'll get to hear from Jesse, Anthony, and Sincere today. We can take a lesson from the disability rights movement of nothing about us without us through this conversation today. But I am honored to introduce to you now the one and only Cyndi Lauper.
Okay. I'm so grateful that everybody came here today to celebrate the anniversary, the 40th anniversary of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. I know that I'm known as an entertainer or a small gal with a big voice or a big mouth. And I decided a while back to use my big voice to be the voice for the voiceless. And certainly these kids, these LBJ, well, I've had so many times they had made me explain the abbreviations, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth, which make up 40% or up to 40% of the homeless young people in this country. When the alarming thing, what got me was that, what would you say, Renee, up to 7% of the general population of youth in this country identify as gay or transgender, in layman's terms. That, to me, is alarming because that means that kids are being thrown away because of who they are. I think we need these kids. I think you never know who's going to turn out to be what. There is a bill. I can repeat the same stuff that Risa and Laura just told you. The one thing that our fund or organization does is try and make a network for all of the people and programs around the country to talk to each other, to find out what works, what doesn't work. It's hard to get a count on these kids because who the heck wants to say, yeah, I'm homeless and I'm gay, beat me up, you know. It's tough for the kids. It's really tough. And everybody wants to be a tough guy, but when you think about it, look at a 15-year-old. And nowadays, kids are coming out even younger because it seems from the media that, you know, it's cool to be who you are. And then they come out and their parents don't know how to deal with this. So unfortunately, sometimes it comes to them running away out of fear of rejection or violence or both. And that's kind of sad for a kid because, you know, kids don't really ask to be born, and they don't come with a, you know, money-back guarantee. You know, when you buy something, you get something. You can't go and you know, return them. There's no return policy when you become a parent, and it's tough. It's not easy to be a parent. So we also wanted to work with Renee and other organizations and outreach programs and RISA. And I also want to say that the people that are doing this work really hard, and they're like angels, okay? They go out in the field, and they talk to these kids, and sometimes you get some kids to come in, and sometimes you don't. These homeless kids hide, so it's hard to get a count. But we need a real count, as Risa said, and as Laura said, to help them. And that's kind of the work that we've been doing, because I don't think you should throw any kid away, and they shouldn't. 1 minute, thank you. Okay, let me just cut to the chase. All right? For those of you who don't know, Senator Leahy and Senator Collins recently introduced the Runaway Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act. Okay? It improves RIA in a number of ways, including recognizing the needs of all youth, including gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender youth experiencing homelessness. Okay, it includes a provision that aims to support family reunification and intervention, which is crucial as family conflicts is the number one reason. We just said that. Most important, a non-discrimination clause to include LGBT homeless youth, not only to have access to crucial services, but also services are safe, welcoming, better tailored to meet their unique needs, which will prevent unsafe activities they need to do to survive. Right? The legislation has cleared the Senate and the Senate Judiciary, I can't even speak, committee, by a strong vote. Now it's headed for the Senate. We all need to roll our sleeves up and make this happen for the kids. It's important. And actually, it saves money. Instead of punishing them for being homeless, let's bring them back in. And let me tell you one thing, it's well worth your money. I was one of the kids that benefited from a program like this, and I think that it's important. I think that I gave back, and I always try to. And you never know who these kids are going to be. I never for one thought I'd be anything or amount to anybody. And it's ironic how I'm standing here with these people, the same kind of people that helped me re-enter and go from hostile to hostels, you know, youth hostels, to shelters, to a home of my own. So thank you very much, and please, please, let's be energized and make this thing happen, okay? Thank you so much. Wait a minute, that was silly. Let me just say something. From one, now let me introduce one of these kids. You look like beautiful kids. I do not know your name. You are the next speaker, aren't you? Come on up. Which one's speaking first? Oh, you are introducing them. Okay. So what is your name?
Debbie Powell.
Yes, it's right here. Let me introduce Debbie Powell. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Cindy. I get the honor of introducing our youth speakers today. I'm Debbie Powell. I'm the Deputy Associate Commissioner for the Family and Youth Services Bureau. We are the federal funder for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program. And I'm honored to introduce these three young people that we have with us today. You know, they exemplify what happens when we work in partnership for success. And so first we have Jessica McCormick. She's a student at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she expects to graduate in December with a double major in sociology and community leadership. Jessie first became homeless in high school and received help from Arbor Circle, a Grand Rapids grantee of the Family and Youth Services Bureau Runaway and Homeless Youth Program. Because of her experiences with homelessness in high school and college, Jessie has advocated locally and nationally for homeless college students. And I'll let Jessie tell you more about her work and her homelessness.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessie McCormick, and I am here from Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan to share some of my experiences. I became homeless right before my senior year of high school. I was removed from local police from my home, and it didn't match up with the county's definition of what age was eligible for foster care. I was assisted by, as was mentioned, Arbor Circle, an organization in Grand Rapids who helped me with case management and ultimately encouraged me to attend Aquinas College where I had been accepted. This was really crucial. As was mentioned in the study, one of the main things that young people really are looking for are employment and education opportunities. And I truly saw this as one of the avenues that I needed to take in order to rise above the situation and escape the cycle of poverty. I think it's also important to note, however, that once you're in college, there are multiple barriers to staying in college and to staying that course and succeeding within it. And I think those were also mentioned. It goes hand in hand with employment opportunities, transportation, healthcare, housing. All of these things are essential if you're to focus on your school, succeed, and ultimately graduate from college and move on to your successful life. I think that those are largely things that need to be addressed. I know I worked with Change.org and asked my school particularly to focus on their break policies, fall breaks, Christmas breaks, traditionally where homeless students may not have an opportunity to stay safe, stay sheltered. I was very fortunate that Change was happy with my campaign, and we received just short of 127,000 signatures, which led my school to a greater discussion. It kind of led them to take us more seriously. This past April, we, as a school, they took action, and we're moving towards solutions. We met with probably 6 or 7 different schools within the Grand Rapids area who are facing similar challenges to get the process started and start a productive discussion of where we go from here, how we can collaborate, what solutions may be. So I'm very happy to see that progress, not only within my school, but that they're leading within our community. I think that all of you here today are aware that there's a hashtag End Youth Homelessness, but I also think that it's important to move from our awareness and spreading this awareness to our action. Therefore, I wanted to use some of my experiences to maybe give you guys ideas on how you can take action, how you can help, how you can participate in this. I think we all are aware of high schools in our areas, and those high schools have liaisons. And each of you, I mean, anybody can do this, can contact their local liaison to see what they need, how they can help. Maybe they need something as simple as mentors to talk to these students or to connect them with. Maybe these youth need school supplies. Maybe these youth need shoes that fit, maybe even that they pick out, clothing. All of these basic needs that can be met by anybody. I mean, everybody lives in the district of a high school. For those of us here who work for service providers, you can be useful by empowering the youth you work with. Speak to them about what they can do, how they can move forward. Encourage them to pursue those employment opportunities, those educational opportunities, and help them on those basic steps. The FAFSA, help them with the FAFSA. Help them with all of the different expectations and documents they're expected to set forth. And for those of you today who work directly with policy, I know that it was mentioned that there were more than 49,000 youth counted that were homeless on a given night in January. And I would agree with Cindy that maybe that's a low estimate. I mean, I've heard numbers between 1.5 and 2 million. And I think that's due to the fact that because it's such an invisible population and because we do blend in, it's more difficult to track that. So I think that we could really benefit on a policy level from a definition and from kind of some safe way to measure in order to move forward. And if we're really going to end our goal of youth homelessness by 2020, I think that it's essential to have an aligning definition that will look into that and that will embrace all of the different situations that homeless youth are in, from living in their cars to staying with friends to couch hopping. There are multiple different possibilities, and I think it's very important to address that. So I hope that today each of you will leave not only with some encouragement and some ideas about the policies and about what can be done, but about how you can take action and how you can be part of the solution.
Thank you, Jessie, so much for your remarks. I think you're a future policymaker. I have several ideas that we will use to help redesign our services for youth that are homeless. And so next we have Anthony Ross. Anthony grew up right here in Washington, D.C. Homeless at age 13, he entered the Family and Youth Services Bureau-funded emergency shelter at Sasha Bruce Youth Work. Later, he studied for the GED while working 2 jobs. He went on to attend University in Raleigh, North Carolina, and graduated magna cum laude. Now he aspires to become a lawyer, and he's been accepted, he shared with me earlier, he's been accepted at the University of North Carolina Central into the law program, and is looking for scholarships and grants. So if you have any information to share, I'm just saying, help him out, okay? Anthony says the ongoing support of Sasha Bruce, and in particular, former staff member George Montgomery, who is here today, helped him overcome homelessness. Anthony, please join us.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anthony Ross, a 24-year-old African-American male, and my dream is to show the people of the world that they can become successful no matter the circumstances. At age 13, I lost my grandmother, who was a sole caretaker, to heart disease. I never knew my dad, and my mother was a drug addict. When I lived with my mom after my grandmother's death, she had my sisters and I living in a house with no water, heat, and electricity for months due to her drug use. My mother's attempt to take care of my sisters and me only lasted 9 months. We ran out of the house one night when she tried to murder us with a meat cleaver. My sisters and I were separated as they went to live with their father's family, while I ended up homeless, sleeping in cars and homeless shelters in Washington, D.C. My mother's sisters tried to take care of me but could not. One tried to hit me with a frying pan because she was always stressed out, and the other was an alcoholic who threw my clothes out of her apartment and then threw my birth certificate and social security card in my face, stating that she no longer wanted to take care of me. I then began living with strangers. They were a family of 13 who lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom Section 8 apartment in Southeast Washington, D.C. They would not allow me to get food from the refrigerator, and when I found out that they were getting food stamps and welfare benefits using my name, I was beat up and kicked out of the house. I had no choice but to return back to the homeless shelter. I always had to watch my back and protect my belongings because different people would sleep in the shelter throughout the night. I wanted to go to high school so bad, but I could not because I needed to feed and clothe myself at such a young age. I was able to enroll into a 2-year GED program at age 16 while I worked at Starbucks during the daytime and Ruby Tuesday at night. After I earned my GED, I then began to prepare for the SAT exams because I wanted to go to college. I stayed up until 3 and 4 in the morning teaching myself algebra, trigonometry, logarithms, and geometry by watching YouTube videos and had tutors come out to the shelter to tutor me. After I was accepted into St. Augustine's University in 2009 in North Carolina, I spent 4 to 6 hours a day in the library studying in the syllabus and earned a 4.0 GPA my freshman year. Thank you. Because I was overlooked in the foster care system and was never assigned a foster family, I was housed and invited to eat Thanksgiving dinners and spend Christmases with my friends and mentors when the campus closed down for holiday breaks because I had nowhere to go. While I was in college, I was inducted into the Alpha Kappa Mu National Honor Society and Pi Gamma Mu International Honor Society with Social Sciences. I was on the President's and Dean's list since freshman year, and out of all political science majors in the university, I won a department award. I served 3 years in the Student Government Association and was elected student body president of the university my junior year. I interned for the mayor of Washington, D.C., Adrian Fenty. This was a seminal experience that exposed me to politics and enhanced my professionalism in the workplace where he and President Obama performed several initiatives together, which I was able to see firsthand. I served as a guest speaker at the British Embassy and was one out of 15 homeless students in the United States chosen to attend a scholarship conference on behalf of the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth. The 15 of us not only shared our stories in front of over 700 policymakers to decrease youth homelessness in America, but we also built the bond of a family that we never had. Our efforts helped draft a bill to Congress for a Homeless Youth Act before we received awards on Capitol Hill from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. On May 5, 2013, I graduated magna cum laude in the top percentile of my graduating class and department. I am now aspiring to become an attorney and later run for political office. According to my Instagram, over 100,000 people across the world, including from Australia, Oslo, Norway, Singapore, and England, have urged me to write my autobiography, Homeless at Age 13 to a College Graduate, that was recently published on Amazon.com in hopes of helping others achieve their goals despite the adversities that life may bring. Please not only support me by purchasing a copy of my autobiography, Homeless at Age 13 to a College Graduate, but also share it with your family and friends to help someone else in need. It is important that we keep funding youth homelessness programs to help others succeed, such as I was able to. Thank you and God bless.
I'm just saying, awesome. Inspired. I'm going to introduce you to my son. Maybe you can help him. Okay, so now we have Sincere. Sincere was raised in the Garfield Park neighborhood on Chicago's west side. As a young adult, he faced homelessness when his mother passed away from cancer. Coming out led to the further loss of his stable support system. He found the programs of the Night Ministry in Chicago, which receives funding from the Family and Youth Services Bureau. Now he wants to change the way people think about homeless individuals, and he has become an outspoken advocate for the young people in Chicago. Please welcome Sincere.
Good afternoon, everyone. As she just said, my name is Sincere. And I grew up, as she just told you, I grew up on the west side of Chicago in the Garfield Park and Austin neighborhoods. Growing up, I honestly didn't have a really tough time. I was living with my mother and my grandmother, along with my sister, who really supported me through a lot of things throughout life. In 2008, my mom lost her battle to cancer, which left me in a state of not knowing what to do with life, how to proceed, anything. At that point in time, I decided to become my authentic self and decided to come out to some of my friends and family, which I thought was the easiest process because we had got over that hump, which in reality was one of the biggest challenges of my life. I was always told by friends, it was like, you should always be who you are no matter what's going on, except for they left out the fact, unless you're gay, keep that to yourself. So upon coming out, it was a battle just to figure out resources, just to figure out where I was going to go because my mom was my main caregiver. That role had kind of reversed as she got sicker. However, I just managed to maintain. In 2008, I became fully homeless or dependent on the streets to survive. Upon coming out, I just started posting things on Facebook, just saying how over things that I was, how I was ready to just give up on life. And a lot of folks that I didn't even know started sending me inbox messages telling me to not give up, that there weren't many services, but there was like this one neighborhood where everyone went in Chicago, which was the Lakeview, also known as Boys Town area. Upon getting to the Boys Town area, I received support from folks that I never would have imagined. Folks who were in similar situations as me, folks who were in the struggle themselves but wanted to make sure that not another person felt unsupported. For a while, for about 2 years, I traveled just on the streets, staying in abandoned buildings, staying in parks, districts, friends' houses, just anywhere pretty much where I felt safe enough to go to sleep, with maybe 10 of us at a time. And a little bit shortly after that, we found the night ministry. They opened a low-barrier youth shelter, which allowed folks to come in as they are, meaning they didn't try to figure out why you were homeless, what type of person you were. They were there just solely to provide the support that you needed at that time, which blew my mind because I never thought that someone would be willing to give or to help without receiving something in return. From 2008 to 2012, I tried going to school on and off, but without a safe place to keep books, a safe place to study, and honestly, sometimes doing homework in the rain ruined my books. Sometimes stuff was stolen as I was asleep, and it just created another barrier to trying to get an education. In 2012, I decided that I was just going to continue to just keep studying for my GED and continue to try to move forward with my education. At that point in time, one of my many mentors actually told me about a job opening within the night ministry that they thought that I was highly qualified for. Of course, I did not believe this whatsoever. But after talking to a couple of friends who encouraged me to continue moving forward with my life, I actually applied and interviewed for the position. Nonetheless, I was offered a job at the night ministry within the youth shelter that I used to attend myself, which was the greatest, it was one of the best days of my life, to say it simply. I never would have imagined that I would actually be one of the people that would be there for folks, to show and guide folks and to show them that there's not just an end when you become homeless, that there's still a future, there's still things that you can move forward to. Since then, I have been back and forth from small cities, big cities throughout this country, just letting folks know that the basic support that folks never even think of, or the privileges that we all hold as far as food, shelter, just a person to talk to, those are the things that are deeply needed in order to end this epidemic, to say the least. Right now, I have just been promoted to a full-time position at the night ministry within the youth shelter program, which allows me to be there more talk to folks, see what the needs are, the current needs of folks, because the needs of 4 years ago definitely are not the needs now. People believe that things stay the same, and that we always need to just give out the same resources and the same types of support, when young people evolve rapidly, especially now. As I heard folks say earlier, young folks are coming out as early as maybe 12, 13, if not younger. Therefore, we need to be ready in order to support those young folks who do come out. Also, I have been currently talking to a lot of folks about how to realize my dream of opening a 24-hour youth resource center. The 24-hour youth resource center would basically be a combination of a drop-in center, a youth center, and an educational center. That way, young folks can find everything that they need in one place, although we do understand that everyone wouldn't be able to stay or get the resources. It would be open to maximize the amount of folks that we can serve at that moment. Thank you.
So I want to give a great big thank you to our youth speakers today. You've heard me say this before, but every time I hear one of you all speak, it makes me know that, the supports that we provide in our programs are what you need, and you're true inspirations, and I'm so happy that you're sharing your stories here today, and I hope you are able to touch many other lives, especially other youth's lives that feel hopeless and feel that there's no place to go. To see you all, the successes, the things that you've accomplished, it gives hope, and it's so wonderful that you're here, not just adults who've never experienced homelessness, but people who've experienced homelessness to show that they can be successful, but they need all of us to help. They really do. And so what I heard, of course, we always need more funding. With social programs, we always need that. But what I heard so loud and clear, that it was the positive adult in those lives that helped them make a difference. So, we always say how overburdened we are with our own life. But if you have an hour a week, an hour a day to give support to a young person who just needs to have an adult that says, you can do it. I believe in you. That's the most important thing that we all can do in this room. And so I'm going to go off script for a minute and just ask the adults that have been a part of these young people's lives just to stand. I know Ms. Montgomery's here. I know that someone also came with Sincere. I'm not sure who came with Jessica, but just stand up, because you gave your time today even to come to travel with them. Yeah. Thank you. You are also an inspiration for us. And so this is the opportunity we have now to open up the floor for questions for our youth. I'm going to ask that the press hold their questions to the end, and I'm going to ask that our guests on the floor ask questions. Are there any questions out there for our youth panel? Chris Holloway, yes?
Well, am I on? All right, great. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I want to say a special thanks to our guests, the three youth who really, in the brief time that they've had with us, have demonstrated an amazing story of resiliency, and one that we all need to take away as inspiration for our own lives. Whenever we think that we're in a position of trouble or difficulty, I think we need to reflect back on the stories that they've given us today and realize that more often than not, we're not really in that bad of a situation after all. So thank you for that. I do have somewhat of a softball question for you all to get the ball rolling. You've already talked about positive adult connections, people in your lives, and we've obviously acknowledged a couple of those folks that are here. Can you talk at all about maybe some of the other points, 1 or 2 points each, of things that have really meant the difference between being in a continued homeless situation or being able to cross over into a situation that has some sense of permanency and facing forward movement in your life?
Right.
I would say that working with schools and the policies that schools have has been really important for me. Everything from how they handle a young person who doesn't have the traditional social ties, who doesn't have, I transferred high schools 5 times, and I don't think I had the same math classes any 2 semesters that we're supposed to be in. And with standards changing from district to district to district, and with where you are changing between that, it was very difficult for me to have kind of a ground line or baseline. So everything from how they handle that kind of establishing baseline to how they handle the things like break housing, how they handle resources like getting food, getting employment opportunities, those were all very important to me.
And I just want to say that it's extremely difficult to look past the adults in our lives, because as I mentioned earlier in my speech, I didn't have any family support, and I was raised by my mentors and community members in Washington, D.C., and they weren't even family. So when they were raising me, I just took a look at how successful they were. And I've always just wanted to be in that circle of success. Every time I'll see Mr. George, and he was just established, and he was always there for us as a social worker, but he did it for over 20 years, and that's how dedicated he was. That kept me going because I didn't want to disappoint him or any other people. And for them not to be my family members, for me to let them down, put all the effort into helping me, and for me to just give up, it just wasn't really worth it, and I wanted to make them proud. So just being around a lot of successful people keeps me motivated, and to say, I want to be just like that, you know, or I wish I was as great as you are. Because leadership starts at the top, and if leadership isn't at the top, then who are you going to look up to? So that was a very important thing for me, and that's actually what keeps me going today, is a lot of successful people in the room, and just success, period, because I'm so hungry for it to the point that it's going to keep me going regardless.
I would like to say one of the things that really kept me moving throughout this process and my experiences was, again, the fact that I was able to access these resources without worrying about what people thought about me or how they perceived my gender, sexual orientation, anything like that, that it was just a clear, open program for folks, whoever needed it, to access it. They didn't ask where you came from, how you became homeless, what your sexual orientation is. All of those things were eliminated, so I can keep my mind focused on my goals instead of having to worry about figuring out exactly who I want to be, which I still haven't done yet. So, that was the main thing for me, just to keep me pushing, because it was one less thing that I had to worry about while trying to get off the street.
Thank you so much. Are there? Yes.
Jayalent with Generations United. We do advocacy for grandparents and other relatives raising children, and a couple of you mentioned grandparents. I'm wondering, for those of you that were estranged or separated from extended family, if there are any particular resources that would be helpful at repairing, healing those connections, or building connections to maybe extended family that are far away that might be supports and resources to you.
Well, I would like to say that as far as the extension and reaching out and having resources, Facebook was pretty big for me because I wasn't in contact with any of my family members. And social networking is big. I use Facebook and Instagram, and I put my graduation invitation out to my friends and asked them if they can repost my story to help me find my family before graduation. And my story went viral to over 100,000 people, and I was unfortunately, my family was not able to come for my graduation because I didn't find them in time. But 2 weeks later, the story kept going, and I actually got in contact with my cousin. She said the last time she saw me was when I was 5 years old, and she wondered what happened to me. And so she put me in contact with my sisters, and I've just recently, I came to D.C. actually a couple days ago for this event, and I'm actually in the process of seeing some of my sisters and my nieces and nephews that I haven't even met yet. So social network is very big when it comes to trying to reach out to that extended family.
In my experience, I've found that when talking to families about different situations, just having conversations about LGBT issues, about different barriers around what young people have to go through in order to survive on their own is just enough, just to at least open people's minds to what's really going on. For me personally, there was a movie that I found about a year and a half ago called A Fish Out of Water. That movie, just like watching it with friends and watching it with family to break down some of the more religious barriers found in like the communities that I belong to, was very, very helpful.
I by no means came from a small family. My mom was the youngest of 9, so I do have multiple aunts and uncles who I am aware of and I am connected with, but who were in similar situations or were otherwise unable to help. I believe 2 or 3 of her siblings also were homeless. They've had addiction issues. So I think that at that point, it's almost worthwhile to, as everybody is here today, to do support young people so that when we are older and we are in the position of having our own families, that we're not surrounded with the same situation where our young people, our own children, our own families are in need and we are unable to support them.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ruth White with the National Center for Housing and Child Welfare and Covenant House International. And I want to thank you for the extreme generosity that you show in sharing your stories with us. And hopefully that will move the ball policy-wise and when you guys are in office. I'll help out, work on your campaign or whatever. Actually, my question, though, is for Mark Greenberg, because I'm wondering what the timeline or plan is at HHS for instituting something that looks like the money follows the person program that Medicaid has for disabled adults. I think that we're here to make sure that the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act does get passed, and it's ridiculous that it hasn't yet passed because it will pass, so let's accelerate the timeline. But the reality is that's $140 million. On the foster care side of the ledger, we're talking something like $20 billion. Any kid under the age of 18 in the United States is entitled to services, and it doesn't have to be foster care. Especially for a GLBTQ kid, that might not be the appropriate setting. Maybe it's youth care, maybe it's Sasha Bruce, maybe it's night ministry, maybe it's your own apartment, because the money should also be able to be used to subsidize rent. And in states where you can stay in foster care till you're 21, that money should have followed you right to college, right? So I'm wondering what HHS's plans are on getting the word out that the money is flexible and these kids should be taken care of. You should never be turned away from being the federal entitlement at age 13, but it doesn't mean you. And you know what? You should be able to live with your grandma if it is appropriate. But if it's not, you should never be turned away. You should still get that federal entitlement dollars.
Sure. So thank you. We think that there is much more that needs to be done in strengthening coordination between the foster care system and the runaway and homeless youth system. It is absolutely clear when we talk to providers across the country, this is just a recurrent theme in those conversations. Within ACF, the part of ACF that has responsibility for foster care, the Children's Bureau and FYSB, have been involved in a set of active conversations which are going to be leading to a set of, the technical term is information memoranda, that would be going out to child welfare agencies and runaway and homeless youth providers on a whole set of issues related to stronger coordination. So that will be forthcoming. But let me just invite my colleagues. Is there anything else you'd want to say on that?
No, that was very comprehensive. Yeah.
And
so we are on fast track. So hopefully by the conference, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Conference in November, we'll have something that's already been disseminated to you, that information memorandum.
I also wanted to say with the $150 million that, to be honest, we need the programs to keep being funded so that we can have more successful youth as ourselves come out, because we're just 3 people and there is extremely more than 3 people who have goals and aspirations that they cannot achieve because of money. And my situation was that I couldn't go to high school and I needed to earn my GED to go to college. Not all colleges accept GEDs, but I was able to get into a 4-year private school who did. But the thing is that I've been a presidential scholar, ever since I've been there, but I couldn't be honored for a full ride or scholarships because I never received a high school diploma, and I also had to take out student loans. And the same thing with law school. I have to take a break because it's costly for 3 years to get my GED, and I want to keep going, but I believe that some of that money should also not help get the youth homeless there, but to also keep them there. So
I'd also like to point out that you mentioned there's the discrepancy between the foster youth and homeless youth. And I believe I'm speaking for all 3 of us that even though we were all under the age of 18 when we became homeless, none of us was eligible for the foster care, which may have followed us into college, which may have followed us into adulthood. So I think that double reemphasizes the necessity of having kind of a common definition or some kind of way to define who is and who is not homeless youth and who is not eligible to receive those funds.
And so before we go to Maureen, you're going to be the last question, but before we do that, would anybody on the panel like to ask a question? Cindy, would you like to ask a question of the youth?
Well, there's always a map of how to, and a lot of times it is the mentor that helps you navigate through the system. The system is vast and very confusing to me, and I'm a grown-up. But for a kid, once you get ABC, that helps, right? It's like a map. Is that how you, I mean, well, yeah, that's all you guys have been saying over and over again, as a map. But the foster care system, I have heard from kids from LGBT youth, that the foster care system was sometimes, most of the time, they were with very abusive people. And they couldn't figure out if it was, which was worse, what they ran away from or what they wound up in. That's a main concern for me about you kids being on the street. And maybe you could tell them about that. Maybe you could.
So, honestly, I was not a part of the foster care system myself. However, a lot of the folks that I've come in contact with and a lot of the folks that I still talk to this day have come from the foster care system. And the foster care system is basically set up just as home situations are. You still have folks who do not understand young people. You still have folks who are not willing to change their thought process around LGBT issues. You're basically, with the foster care system, like, there needs to be more intentionality about who becomes foster parents.
That's right.
Because there needs to be some type of LGBT competency training if you're going to take in an LGBT young person. Because if you don't understand a wide variety of things, then there would be no point of you furthering damaging this person's life, just to be honest.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Last question.
I'm Lauren Blaha with the National Runaway Safe Line, and I want to thank the panelists, especially Cindy and the young people. So we're a 24-hour online and hotline service to help young people get to safety or reunited with their families. And if you were aware of our services, would there be obstacles or reasons that you wouldn't reach out?
One of the obstacles that just come off the top of my mind would be, where do I get the access to internet and or a phone to call? Because payphones don't exist like they used to. So calling toll-free numbers, that's kind of not a thing that can happen anymore. And it's just, where would I be able to use the internet, or where would I be able to use a phone in order to call to figure out where these services are?
Did anybody else like to respond to that?
I would say, too, that I don't think the barrier would be communicating or reaching out. I think sometimes in experiences that I've had when I reach out to certain groups or individuals, a certain solution will be proposed, like one of the myths that you brought up, like, oh, why don't you just go home? And it's difficult when you're a young person who's reaching out to somebody for help and they're proposing solutions like this to explain the whole situation or to kind of justify your reasoning when you really just are looking for a safe place to go. So I think that would be one thing to focus on, is when a young person says this won't work, to not go into the details of why not, just to.
And to add to that, we need adults in our lives, to be honest. We definitely can't do it alone, and we need adults who are understanding. And we have a lot of people in the crowd today listening to our stories, and I just don't hope that you guys just walk away. And I know that some are here for policies and whatnot, but please, be there for the kids struggling and who want to succeed, because a lot of us don't know where to turn. And if it wasn't for my mentors and supporters, I wouldn't even be here today sitting at this panel with the others. So it's extremely important for adults to take role as well.
And one last thing that I would like to add is that a lot of times when those type places are contacted by young people, there's this life roadmap that's set up for them. A lot of times young people are at a point where it's just like, I need this one basic thing. At this moment in time, I may not be thinking about going to college, or right now I might not be thinking about whatever you have set up. Right now, I just want to lay down for the night. So if you just offer those things that young people are asking for and then move forward, that'll be the best strategy ever.
Thank you so much for our youth panel. And thank you so much for our other speakers, as well as our guest audience, for coming today. If you want to join us in this challenge and fight to end youth homelessness, please go to youthhomelessness.acf.hhs.gov. Thank you all for coming.